Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hi there, you're welcome to today's episode. If you are a long-time listener of this podcast, you'll know that I don't really do interviews that often. I think I've probably interviewed maybe 5, maybe max 6 people over the course of the 3 years that I've been doing this podcast. Mostly it's just yours truly rattling on about something that I think is interesting to me, and then hopefully it's interesting to somebody else or to you. But today I have decided that I want to share an interview with somebody that I know very well. Tracey Moran Rousseau, as she's also known. She's an Irish entrepreneur and a communications leader, not necessarily globally well known, but would have a reputation in Ireland. And the Moran family in particular would have been, or is one of the most well-known hospitality groups in the country. It includes the iconic Red Cow Moran Hotel in Dublin. And Tracey has a background in sales, marketing, PR, communications, and has also been instrumental in her own way in the growth and the modernization of the family business, overseeing major expansion and launching new hospitality concepts like the Wren Urban Nest Hotel in Dublin, which was Ireland's first net carbon neutral hotel. Quite an achievement in itself. And if you've been a visitor to Dublin, you might well have stayed there. If you haven't stayed there yet, it's worth a check out. But today's interview with Tracey is not about that really. It's beyond the hospitality sector is what I'm curious about. This is the Inner Edge as a podcast, and part of my own personal mission is to increase awareness and education on the criticality of mental health in the context actually of leadership and high performance. Now, Tracey's created something that I think is quite interesting in that context, but for teenagers. She's the founder of Inside Out Camps, which is, I would say, and I don't use this word lightly, a transformative experience through summer camps for 12 to 15-year-olds. The camps, without really saying these words, actually help build these words. So things like resilience, leadership, emotional intelligence, creativity, and importantly, self-esteem and self-expression. Because they offer the teenagers a chance to, in a very fun way, unplug, connect, and grow in a supportive environment. So Tracey's a mother of 3. She's a very passionate advocate for youth mental health. And she brings a unique blend of personal insight and professional expertise to all of the things she does, both in the Moran Hospitality Group and also in Inside Out Camps. And that's what I want to explore with her today, is a bit of her own journey to finding this idea and then to bringing it to life and some of the challenges around that. And Tracey will speak very openly about some of her own challenges around mental health and depression, about doubt, about not having any experience in a new sector and how she kind of overcame that, about support that she got. So as an entrepreneur and as a leader and as a mother and as a human, I just think this interview, there's a lot in it. So I encourage you to stay with it. And at the end, I will loop back for a very short summary of some of the key takeaways that I took out of it that I think maybe might be pertinent to you as somebody who is a leader or perhaps a parent or just somebody who's looking to get the best out of themselves. I should say as well that during the conversation, Tracey, you'll hear her speak about things like something called Thrive. She'll also mention something called the Inner Circle, of which she was a part of. Full disclosure, so Tracey, I guess, has been, I suppose I've worked with her probably over the last 8-9 years, I think, roughly. And Thrive is a retreat that I run once a year for leaders. And the Inner Circle is kind of a forum that I have for business owners, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. It's not to give it a plug, it's more to give you context that is kind of maybe where she came in, and as she'll explain in the interview, how where one of the ideas came in for the Inside Out Camp. So it's just to give you some context on that. What I'll do at the end of this interview is I will loop back just to close out with maybe 2 or 3 things that really struck me from the conversation, which I find very interesting for multiple reasons. She starts off the interview with a really interesting question that I think should resonate with most people. It's not where I expected us to start, and I could have gone off on a tangent because of it, but I had to focus on where I wanted to go, which is the inside out camps. But I'll loop back and give you some context maybe about that particular question that she asked. She asked herself in a certain context, which led to a huge change in how she sees herself and also the work that she does. So let's get into the interview, and I hope you enjoy it. Tracey, welcome to The Inner Edge.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Shane.
It's great to have you here. And I think we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics today that will be of interest to the people listening. Obviously, the main thing we're going to talk about is this phenomenal organization that you started called the Inside Out Camps. And before we went live here in terms of recording this interview, we were talking about, you were reminding me of the idea, where the idea started. Mm-hmm. And also you had reminded me of, I was at an event that I was running, and I had asked everybody to introduce themselves and who are they? And even before we went live, I went, Tracey, how do I introduce you? What do I call you? So do you want to share for the listeners what you said to me there? I think it's quite relevant.
Yeah. So I suppose Tracey is how you introduced me. But depending on the setting that you're in, and I was in a business environment, and the natural instinct would be for me to introduce myself as Tracey Moran, which is my maiden name, but it also happens to be my business name, or my family business name. But that particular question had a particularly profound impact on me that day. It was my third Thrive, and I had been with you for a couple of years. And as you know, I think I spent more of the time over those 2 days crying than I did at any stage before or after.
Just to give context, apart from the fact people are thinking, why was Shane making?
How did Shane make me cry?
Yeah. But I did. It wasn't me. I plead the fifth. But you mentioned Thrive. So just for people that, like, I run an annual retreat called the Thrive Experience. So that's what Tracey's referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, again, we'll get into detail about, I suppose what Thrive entails and how it led to my Inside Out Camps initiative. But the question was asked about, who are you? Introduce yourself. And what I really realized as the questions were going around the room was, obviously everybody introduced themselves, or for the most part, they introduced themselves by their work. And for me, it really struck me that at that stage in my life, I was Tracey Moran in business and recognized around the room as Tracey Moran in business. At home, I'd become Tracey Rousseau, wife and mother of 3 children. But at that point in my life, I was struggling to really, I suppose, grasp who Tracey herself is and what she stands for. And I had the couple of years with you beforehand where you'd asked all those difficult questions about what would people say about you, what's your legacy going to be. And that journey, I think, it just culminated in that third Thrive, where I had one of those ahas and I went, who the hell am I? And who is Tracey? And what does she stand for? And what does she believe in? And all that goes with it. So that triggered something in me. I was a bit emotional, to say the least, for the remainder of that couple of days. But it struck a chord, and over the course of the next couple of weeks, an idea really struck. And that idea became Inside Out Camps. And to me, I suppose it's a similar vein, it's a similar escape, it's a similar experience to Thrive, but for young people. Because what I discovered at that stage was how much learning I had to do about myself, and how much I wanted to know about myself, that I wish I had known sooner, because it would have helped me with decisions, with direction, with all of life's challenges. And I suppose as I sit with you now, I've gotten answers to a lot of those questions, and I've worked hard with you and with myself over the last couple of years. But it's also made me even more, I suppose, determined to make Inside Out the place where younger people can have those ahas, those epiphanies, those opportunities to discover their best self.
Okay, wow. Well, Well, first of all, I think you're giving me a little bit too much credit, to be fair, because I genuinely think this was an idea that you brought out of yourself. But you started off in a way I didn't expect. And I think people listening to this, I think, will be struck by the questions that you asked yourself, because I think there's no more important question than to ask, who are you really? Now, so we could end up going off a complete tangent here, Tracey, but I probably won't let us. But that is a very profound question, like, who are you really? And you said something there, I thought, wow, yeah, like I've forgotten that I remember you said it now, but it's such an interesting thing when people introduce themselves, especially something like that where there's leaders, like business owners, CEOs, they all introduce themselves in a work context, but that's not who they really are.
No.
And synchronistically, I came across some notes from something this morning, just this morning. This is totally random now, but it relates very much to what you said. And it was a quote that something along the lines of, becoming a real leader means really becoming yourself. And then the add-on was, and that is very hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, I genuinely hadn't expected to be talking about this, because from my point of view, and it's probably one of the reasons that I do the work I do, and even the podcast, is to try and share some context and examples. And what we're going to do today is talk to a real person like yourself, who's kind of gone through a phenomenal journey, hasn't been straightforward. But I also want to add in a bit in terms of, you know, I remember several conversations with you before that idea came out, where I guess you were frustrated because you were very much active in your family business, which is a busy, dynamic business with multiple strands to it. But you kept saying to me, you know, I just feel there's something else that I want to do, and I'm not sure what it is. And I just feel I want to try and make an impact. And I feel I want to do something that's maybe just mine,
Mm.
not with my family. Not for any other reason than just there was this kind of feeling. And I just remember several conversations with, like, look, be patient, take your time. But of course, who wants to be patient? Who wants to take their time? I said, look, gradually just keep doing the work, especially on yourself. The idea will emerge. And then when you said to me at that particular event, Thrive, I have an idea about these camps for teens, Inside Out, about, you know, at that time, my memory was it was about like building resilience for kids without really talking about resilience, to do it in a fun way, perhaps to have these kind of adult experience. But you're only reminding me now about, you know, for them almost to start figuring out the answer to your question, which is, who am I? Who am I really? Such a
Yeah.
powerful, powerful question. So, okay, so you've caught me on the hop. This is a really good start from my point of view. So, um, is there anything you want to say to that before I ask you a couple of questions about the camps?
Yeah, like, I suppose when you think about, even just backtrack to when you're a young person and you're, you know, thrown into the throes of picking subjects and deciding your career. When I think back to my time in school, and I think back to the path that I ended up following, it was almost laid out for me, because, you know, you follow a direction that's set, and I think that can be, and we've discussed it in some of the inner circles, that can often be the case either with family businesses or, you know, just our circumstances, our social groupings, our family dynamics. We follow certain paths. And I think it's only hindsight now as an adult that I recognize that, had I known myself, or had any of us known ourselves better, younger, we might not have followed that route. We might have felt more, I suppose, stronger of self to say, well, actually, that's not the route I want to take. And actually, I'm more interested in this. And it takes a strong person to do that. Some people do that. And I'm not saying, you know, there's no exceptions, but that can tend to be the route. And one thing that really resonated with me recently, aside from all your wonderful books that I've obviously read, of course, um, I recently read Mel Robbins' book.
Yes.
And so Mel is a US podcaster and author. And I am going to kind of paraphrase it to suit myself, but what came out for me was that the buck stops with us, and that there's no one on this earth that we are going to spend out the rest of our days with, and that we are guaranteed to be alongside forever and ever, amen, is ourselves. So the sooner we have a good relationship with ourselves, the sooner we like, we love, we value, we appreciate, and I suppose recognize how strong we are to get through whatever we've got to get through, the better we can stand up to life's challenges and we can navigate what comes through. And that's the epitome for what Inside Out Camps is for me. Hindsight is great, but I wish I had had those epiphanies. I wish I had known so much more about myself, and what made me tick, and recognize that I am an individual, and that really the world is my oyster, but I have to embrace it and I have to do it and I have to put in the effort and the work and so on with it.
Okay, so I mean, we'll get to the camps, but what I'm curious about is, you're working on yourself. This question, who am I really? You get this genesis of an idea, an aha moment. What did you do to take it from an idea, an aha moment into, oh, now we've actually got teenagers coming on a camp? Like what actually happened then? What was the journey?
So initially the trigger was, I suppose the trigger was, I've always battled with depression. And the trigger for me was actually looking at it from a proactive mental health side. So actually one of my first calls was to Joan Freeman from Pieta House. So I'd gotten to know Joan through a charity event I had done with Dad. My dad, God rest him, had been made Limerick Man of the Year. And as part of his position, he wanted to do something that gave back. And we did a charity walk from Limerick to Dublin for suicide awareness and prevention. So I got to know Joan at that. Joan was one of my first calls after I had come up with the idea. And I have to say, throughout, she was unwavering. I went from having conversations with Joan to a number of different charities and people who had done, different things with teens and young people with suicidal ideation and all sorts of issues around, I suppose, that area, that age profile. And the one thing I will say about Joan is she was unwavering. You've got to do it. You've got to start somewhere. Where others had sort of said to me, it's too soon, it's too premature. Like I had done Thrive with You that September, and we ran our first camp the following June.
Yeah.
So, for many, it probably was too soon, but I just wanted to get stuck in. And I suppose my background in hotels meant I've always organized events. So I'm used to logistics. I'm used to envisaging an outcome and making a plan and putting the bolts into place.
Yeah.
So, I suppose I started it from there. One of the guys in our inner circle group, Niall, introduced me to an incredible guy called Paul McDermott, who had worked with him at one point. And Paul had come through the whole summer camp initiative in the States. So as another starting point, just in terms of structure and format, I sat down with Paul. And that was so exciting because Paul had been there, done that. And, Paul's first reaction to me was, this is what I want to do. And I want to bring this to Ireland. He was doing the after school care for children. But the residential thing was a whole different ballgame. And, if you think back, I mean, even you as a parent, when you start to look at what initiatives are there for young people to do during the summer, there's loads to do in Ireland, but a lot of it is time filling, space filling. There's very limited, I suppose, opportunity in terms of residential that is focused on particular areas. So this whole idea of a sleepaway, as Paul would call it, with the exception of Gaeltacht, didn't really exist. So between Joan, I suppose, really pushing me, and really, I suppose, I was bouncing the whole ideas of mental health and what we could do and how we could combine it and what the ethos was. Paul for the structure. And then I suppose internally those certain parts of it that I wasn't for turning. And specifically what I mean by that is, when we look at our schooling and, there's so much to be learned in school, and we're in our school environment, Monday to Friday. And as all the different add-ons and the subject choices and all the rest, but one size does not fit all. And some children thrive in school and some children don't. And for me, when I changed schools at the pivotal age of 13, 14, and I moved from Limerick to Dublin, that was where I suppose, the ground or the carpet was taken from under me in terms of confidence. So I looked at the whole schooling, the age profile of where the most impact can be had.
Okay.
From my perspective, again, this is all coming at it from my own thoughts. And one thing that I really wanted, I wanted a camp environment that was lots of fun, but that there was learnings to be had, but learnings to be had in a very non-academic way. So it's a very holistic approach to personal development, experiential.
And
So
the age group that you focused on was what age?
12 initially it was 12 to 14, and we've broadened it to 12 to 15, and we probably will broaden it slightly again, but not too much.
Okay.
It'll go slightly younger. So my thought process on that is that there is care and attention, a little bit of hand holding and minding through primary, just naturally because the children are younger. And then you get into secondary, and first year is a big deal. There's I suppose again there's a bit of hand holding, but second year of secondary school, and I did a number of interviews with teachers in the lead up to doing the camps, and there was one particular teacher that Joan had connected me with, and she said second year of secondary school really is it's a pivotal year in a child's development, because all of a sudden the hand holding is kind of stopped in first year. They might have been surrounded by hordes of friends and groups and the excitement of being in big school. And then they come back up in after summer into secondary. Hormones are raging. There's all sorts of issues, peer pressure. The groups they thought they were going to slot back into may not have come back in. And there's a big reality that all of a sudden, I'm here for the long haul. I've got another couple of years of this, but they haven't quite got their mojo. And the comment she made to me about how she's seen, and her fellow colleagues and teachers have seen the difference and the changes, good and bad, when they've seen a child come in at the start of second year and how they've left at the end of second year. So that was my timing.
Okay, so hold on that for a second. So I am going to loop back to getting into, I really want to hear about some of your insights about what you've learned from working with teens over the last few years, okay? Because I think there's some nice gems there. But before I do that, I just want to go back, because I do think people will be interested in this, because I am anyway, about your journey getting to open the camps in the first place, right? So what I'm wondering is, you've got this idea, because I just think like the people listening to this particular podcast will be like, people are probably like trying to create better things in their work and life. They're trying to get learnings. They do have probably, a broad answer to that question, even that you started with, like, well, who are you really? But what I'm wondering is, you're talking to Joan, you've got different people, you're moving along, you're talking to Paul. At what point did you say, actually, I'm booking the venue, number one, and I'm paying money? And number two, did you have any doubt as you're going along? And how did you manage that?
Well, I'll go to the first question first. The first thing I did was, as my sister always says, my friend Google. I took to Google and I started looking for, I suppose, again, as a hotelier, I could have accommodated the teens in my hotel, but I knew the environment that I wanted to set. So again, throwing back to Thrive, I wanted nature. I wanted an environment that was outdoors predominantly, again, non-classroom. I needed to be able to accommodate and feed. So the natural fit was a boarding school. So I Googled, and Gormanstown was the first one that came up, a school out towards Balbriggan. And I sent out an inquiry, and I sent out a couple of different inquiries, and that was the only one that came back to me at the time. And I went out and I met a guy whose name unfortunately escapes me just this second. But I went out to him, and he was organizing he was trying to do all these different add-ons in terms of extra activities and camps and all the rest of it. And he loved the idea. He said, truth be told, I would have loved to have introduced this myself. So I suppose I had my venue now. I decided it was going to be June because again, I was thinking ahead to the children in secondary school who all of a sudden, first and second years particularly, first years particularly, all of a sudden they've got the whole month of June off. What do you do? So, and that's where my thought process went. I've since changed it to July because I wanted to facilitate primary school leavers as well. But that's really how I suppose the structure of it.
Okay. And what about the doubt?
Together.
Did you have any doubt?
Oh God, I doubted all the way through.
Yeah.
I doubted, you know, when I met different people and they said, no, it's too soon. It's going to come crashing down. Something's going to go wrong. Like at the end of the day, I was going to be responsible for a group of teenagers. Like, again, just to put it into perspective, I have no background in education. I have no background in psychology or anything to do with mental health.
Yeah.
You know, and a resonating comment that Joan said to me was, know your audience.
Yeah. Okay.
So for those 40 children that I had that first year, I rang every single parent directly. I had a personal interview with every single one. I got an insight into every single child so that there were ideally no surprises. And I suppose I wrapped people around me who had also worked in education, in schooling, that were teachers, that did that every day. You know, as it transpired, Paul, who was meant to open the camp with me that summer, got an opportunity to go back to the States. So he introduced me to who has now become my right-hand man, Hilary. And Hilary had done a lot of work with youth and Feroga. So like that, again, teens and that age profile where they would have been challenged or could have been challenged. So, yeah, like there was a little bit of holding of breath, but...
I'm just curious again, and we're moving now into the teens in a second, but if you had so much doubt along the way, why'd you keep going?
It's the limerick in me.
That's the stubborn streak, isn't
it? You know, it's good and bad. I suppose when I get something in my head, I have to deliver it.
Yeah.
I've always followed the ethos. As you know, more recently, I've started to deviate slightly on that. But that's, again, I suppose, coming from learning about myself. But I've always, if I've ever committed to something, I've followed through. If I've ever said I will do something, I will do. And I committed, and that was it. Okay.
Right. Well, look, let's lean a little bit more into the camps. I mean, I'm curious. There's going to be parents listening to this particular interview, I've no doubt, and I'm curious about some of your insights from working closely with teens over the last few years. And what I'm wondering is, what do you think you're seeing on the ground that maybe most parents or adults mightn't realize about teens? Like, would anything strike you in particular?
Well, I'll take a step back for a second, and because it has progressed, right? So the very first camp that we did was actually post-COVID. Like, talk about a baptism of fire. Really couldn't have picked a harder window to start. So it was a baptism of fire. That first year, the first night, the first night that we had 40 children. We had panic attacks, anxiety, homesickness that was off the charts. And again, from my own perspective, and you know, resilience is something I have definitely built up over the last decade. That particular weekend, so we were kicking off on that Monday, and that Friday, my uncle or my step uncle passed away on that Friday, and we were arranging a funeral for that Monday. So in the throes of all of this going on, we had the heartbreak of losing somebody very close to the family. And that was really tough.
I remember.
And where we were holding the camp was so far out, I was going to be having to stay over. So there was all of that dynamic of being 40 minutes away from the family and helping to organize a funeral as well as run the camp. So it was challenging. But that very first night, I stayed over along with all my coaches and leaders. So we all stayed on site. As we have done in all of the years. And by 12 o'clock that night, Hilary and I sat beside each other. And the two of us looked at each other and went, what have we done? Why are we doing this? You know, we had one child that had to go home. He really did not want to be there.
Oh,
And he was just too overwhelmed. So his mum had to come and pick him up. And the next night was the wake, and I was getting calls from parents. So the other thing was I had done all of those personal calls. So my mobile,
yeah.
my every one of those parents had my mobile. And
Okay.
I'm at the wake getting calls from parents saying, this one is sad and this one is sad and this is going on. And I thought, oh my word, what have I done?
Right.
So then I get to Wednesday, and Wednesday's the funeral, and I go back to camp after the funeral. And Wednesday is it's one of the highlights of the camp week. It's campfire night. And we had one of the most spectacular evenings. It was really warm. It was a beautiful summer's evening in Ireland, and we're out in this huge, big green space in Gormanstown. And the camp, we've a guy that we work with doing bushcraft, Ross Wareham, and he does the campfire, the s'mores. They were all doing skits. And to see the difference in those children that night, it was a pivotal point, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were dancing, they were joking, they were hugging each other, they were doing all these fun skits. I genuinely can't overemphasize the
Mm,
impact that that night had. It
mm,
was phenomenal. It was
mm,
absolutely life-changing. And that Friday, the amount of tears, and actually, I'll backtrack for a second. There was one particular lad, and I'll never forget him. The first day he came in on that Monday, he didn't want to be there, and his mom had
mm.
signed him up. He really didn't want to be there. He said, "Listen, I'm going to be in my room for the week, and I'm going to be vaping,
Vaping.
vaping."
Wow.
By Friday, like by Wednesday, he's the one leading the entertainment. He was an incredible force. Honestly, couldn't speak highly enough about him.
Mm,
And by the Friday, literally the tears from that group.
wow.
They did not want to leave. And like parents had seen these
Mm,
trepidatious children
mm.
being delivered and left on the Monday, and were dragging them away on the Friday. And that was the start of it. It was literally life changing.
So go back to my question though.
So go
So
back to the changes. So
yeah. Oh no,
um,
no, not so much the changes. What I'm just curious about in the moment. What do you think parents don't know about teens? What do you think would surprise them? Just based on your own insight from dealing with them.
a bit of my own and a bit of what I'm seeing. It's that peer pressure. It's that wanting to fit in. It is about that confusion piece. You know, the I think I made a comment to you at one stage, even about my own daughter,
Mm,
where she started out as this young, dynamic leader wanting to take on the world. Maya's 11 now. And all of a sudden, then she starts to want to dress the same as everybody else and look the same as. So I'm
mm,
seeing that with the girls,
right.
where they come in and they're all kind of looking the same. They're all trying to act the same. But by the end, you're starting to see them start to recognize their own individuality.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think as parents, to a degree, we're more inclined, well, that's the trend, that's the fashion. They all want to be the same. Whereas I'm very much about encouraging, but what's your style?
Your
What
your
do
own
you
your own
want? Again,
self-expression.
it's trying to pull out that individual.
Okay.
So, you
Okay.
know,
So hold on a second. So that's it. So I mean, the self-expression is key. So let's just, for people listening, give me a concise answer to this question. How would you describe inside out camps? What are they?
uh, a journey of self-discovery
In a fun way, by the sounds of it.
in a super fun way, you know, like I suppose in as concise as I can make it, right? It's time out from your usual routine. It's hanging out with people you don't normally get to hang out with. It's challenging yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally.
And what would you say is
Those
different about
ingredients.
inside out camps versus a standard summer camp? Something else.
Okay, so the majority are not residential, and that was probably one of the hardest elements to add into inside out camps, because when you're adding in accommodation, it becomes
Yeah.
expensive, again, becomes cost prohibitive, it becomes challenging to find even the
Yeah.
accommodation bit. But for me, the residential bit is a no-brainer. It's like when we go away with you and do Thrive, or when I go away with the inner circle and I have my couple of days away. You need to break the chain. You need to leave your habits, leave your routine, and take time away. And ideally in a place that is in beautiful nature, forestry, sea, for that change of dynamic. So that is what the camp experience does. The residential has to be that you're all encompassing. You know, if even when we were struggling with numbers, say in the second year, the amount of people that said to me, "Would you not do day camp?" And I said no, because it will change that dynamic. You have to be completely submersed in it from start to finish. We changed the rules about phones after that first year. We don't give the phones in the evenings. Number one, so that we don't encourage the whole homesicknessness. Sorry, and I will come back to answer the what makes a difference. But so it's a tech-free environment, mainly in nature, hanging out with these people that you wouldn't normally get to hang out with. So again, if you think about you've got all these peers that you're seeing every single day, very difficult to start chatting to somebody new or breaking into a different group. Whereas in a camp experience, you're thrown into it. You don't have a choice. And you've got different social backgrounds, you've different cultures, you've different abilities physically, academically, creatively. So you're being inspired and motivated, not just by the leaders and coaches that are with you, but also by your peers in a very different way, because you're having to be accepting of your teammates.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, I know of some of the activities done. I mean, like, as you say, there's a real mix of different types of things. The thing that I find quite interesting about what you're doing is it's not what you expect, and it's generally quite creative and engaging. Would you tell people, for example, I don't want you to go into all the activities, but you know the one with that you do with John Murray, the photographer?
Yeah.
Can you tell people a little bit about that one, for example? I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So I suppose just to qualify, like the American camps, it is sleepaway and it's multi-activity. Okay. So that in Ireland doesn't exist really without the academics of Gaeltacht. So Gaeltacht, multi-activity, residential, but you have an academic element with Irish. A lot of the other camps are a single activity, so you're not getting to try something new. So getting back to Inside Out camps, the idea is we've got different themes throughout the week. So there is a focus on life skills and also practical skills.
Very good.
And what we've tried to build the week on, apologies for my Hoover there in the background.
Can't hear it.
Yeah, okay. So we've tried to build certain themes around what the outcomes that we want. And one of the outcomes is a lot more around self-acceptance. And this is where John Murray comes in. And this happened randomly. I went for photographs with John Murray, a photographer in the city. And he goes, like, he's a really interesting character. He's a very interesting background, formerly a paramedic who got into photography, but he's very much about, I suppose, when I look at a mirror, as he would explain, you're seeing the other side of yourself. You're seeing yourself in reverse.
Yes.
So he's trying to educate the boys and girls who attend about what you see, first of all, on social media isn't what you're getting. We spoke very briefly at the start of this call about filters.
Yes.
And about editing and all of this perceived beauty and how amazing the world is. But he'll give you a reality check and say, that's not really what it is. This picture took this amount of time to edit and was coerced in all of these different ways. So he gives a little bit of a reality check to all of these social media advocates in the room, first of all. And then he takes photographs of all of them.
Yeah.
He gets them a little bit outside their comfort zone. But what he's showing you is that what you see isn't what we see.
Yeah.
And he invites them to embrace the brand that is themselves. So getting back to the point where I said about Maya, my daughter, and you know how individual she always was growing up, and now she's starting. I mean, even this morning, herself and her friend went down to the shops, and they're dressed identically. And I know there's a bit of fun and innocence in that, but it's this idea that you can be different, you can look different, you don't have to follow the trends and all of that on social media. So what he's saying is that if you copy, then you're copying another brand.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas you as yourself are probably the most, what would you call it? A commoditable brand, or
Well, original, unique.
original. But again, they're all about YouTubing and making money out of brands.
Yeah.
But if you're yourself,
Yes.
surely that has the most
Most
value
value.
to be
Yeah.
had. So that's a really interesting workshop. And
Yeah. It
it's one
sounds
of
amazing.
the few times they're actually sitting down, because they sit
Okay.
and they listen to him talking for a while first, and then he does all of the photo shoot. Um, and again, even just seeing that transition
Mm,
from
mm,
the kind of the
mm.
nervous. And you know what I really enjoyed, certainly with some of my more introverted children over the last couple of summers,
Mm.
where, you know, they don't want to get up for a photograph, and then they'll come to me on the QT afterwards and say, actually, I'd really like to get that photograph. And you see the most beautiful pictures.
Fantastic. No, I love the sound of that. I think that gives a real flavor even for the creative way that you're doing things. What's your vision for your organization?
So it can grow in so many different ways. Like at basic level, it can grow nationally. It can grow obviously in terms of venues and numbers. But the the ultimate for me and my dream would be, I believe, while schools are great and they develop academically for the most part, and there is a certain amount of personal development, I think my late husband mentioned that as part of their schooling in South Africa, every child would get to do a week at camp as part of their personal development.
Super. Yeah.
So my vision and what I would absolutely love to see is that as part of the school program, every child between 11, 12, depending on when they start secondary, and the end of third year, that they have 1 week as part of their personal development, that is provided as part of their
Amazing.
process and their self journey. I'm obviously having to, you know, I'm trying to build a commercial model to get it out there.
Yes.
But I would love to see that funded and available to every single child, because I think there's no learning like going away and a change of perspective, that could be better had, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Look, and I know you. So this isn't kind of meant to be a big love in, but I do know, parents who their kids have gone onto your camps, and it has been amazing to hear some of the stories coming back in terms of like, so what you're saying, I know is real. Okay, so you never know, Tracey. Somebody could be listening to this thinking, actually, do you know what? Maybe I can help get that into the schooling system. You never know. Um, I do want to ask you three rapid fire questions, left to field questions, and I just want you to give me your good answer on the spot. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, they're going to be easy questions now, so there's no wrong answer.
Easy. Okay.
Easy, yeah. So, okay, what's one lesson from the camps that you think every adult needs to hear?
Time out. Time out from habits, routine, and tech. Absolutely essential.
For themselves and for their kids, or just for their
Well,
kids?
for both, but
For
if we're
both.
talking about kids specifically, like, yes, I'm talking about inside out camps, but if there's anything I can tell parents to do, it's to change the scene, change the dynamic. We all need to get away from our habits and our routine, and we need to take the tech away, and we need to immerse ourselves in a different environment, because that creates its own opportunity, perspective, creativity,
Great
inspiration.
thinking. Brilliant. Okay,
First
great.
thinking.
For you personally, when things get tough, do you have a go-to mantra for yourself?
Um, when things get tough, and they have got tough,
Mhm.
as you know, my background, I've had a
Mm.
challenging couple of years. There are days where I do very much struggle, but
Mm.
I think the stage I'm at this stage, I know I've got me,
Wow. Okay. Well, that's
you know, and I
yeah.
will get back up and I will keep going. And I'm very proud that I do have that strength and belief of self to get through and to keep going.
Okay. Well, saying I've got me is pretty powerful in any context. Um, the third one then is, if you were going back to your 15-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, be kinder,
Be kinder
be kinder. Yeah.
to
Um,
yourself, Tracey.
to myself, you know, I really struggled. That was probably the throes of when I was dealing with depression, change of school dynamics, and all the rest of it. Um, I would love to have known another thing that Joan Freeman said to me, and I said this to you one day as well, that I'm a HSP. If I had known then what I know now, I would love to have understood that there was more to me, and to I suppose to invite that discovery to figure myself out more, rather than, I suppose, there were stages at that point in my development where I was almost giving up on myself.
Okay.
That this is shit and I can't cope and I don't know what to do with myself.
We
I
define
wish
for
I'd been
people.
kinder.
Define for people what's a HSP.
A highly sensitive person, an overthinker, an overanalyzer, sensitive to anything that's, if something is bothering me, I will take it to the nth degree and let it overwhelm and upscuttle. Whereas if I had known that, I would have known that that's my thinking doing that back then.
But at least you can say I've got me, which is the important bit. If
I've got me
people,
now.
yeah, well, exactly. So if people want to check out what Inside Out are doing, how do they find out?
So insideoutcamps.ie, and we are,
InsideOutCamps.ie.
yeah, insideoutcamps.ie, and we're also on Instagram. So Instagram, I do all my updates. I do Zoom information evenings because, again, getting people to, I suppose, take a punt on something that's new. This is our
Yeah.
fourth summer. We are a relatively new initiative. That's difficult to do for anyone. So I invite parents to join us for Zoom information evenings so that they can meet me, meet Hilary, get a feel for what we're about, what we're trying to do. And I think that's an important element to have, that we're not some I suppose this, when parents are dropping their children off, it's not this kind of random anonymous group of people that they've just entrusted their children to. This is what we do.
Fantastic. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming onto the Inner Edge and sharing a little bit of your story. There's lots more to you that I know about. So who knows, maybe at some point in the future, we might have a different conversation here as well to share some of the other layers to you and your fascinating life. So congratulations. Well done. And thank you, Tracey.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
So that was the incredible Tracey Moran. And as I said at the start, I wanted to loop back to share some of the things that really struck me from the conversation. And look, the conversation was very short, and there's lots more I could talk to you about Tracey, who I think is just an incredible example of resilience in action. One of the things that struck me right from the very beginning, when she kind of shared that story about, well, introducing herself, but who am I? Really, who am I? Just the importance of how critical self-discovery is. And the importance that Tracey was emphasizing on understanding who you really are. You're not your business role. You're not even your parenting role or whatever. Like, who are you? But to bring that in for teenagers so young, as an opportunity to kind of discover themselves, even in a small way, I just think it's an amazing thing. But it doesn't matter what age you are. I just think discovering who you really are is a real thing. The second thing that struck me was, and I'm a big fan of this anyway myself, is just breaking routine is so important. That getting time away from your life, from your daily habits, from technology, from familiar environments, it just creates amazing opportunity for perspective shift, for creativity, for insights, for personal growth. And yes, she's creating that for the Inside Out camps for teenagers, but it came out of her own learned experience of taking time out, time in nature, time with other people, time to just step back. So, so important. And in a busy, busy world, I think just people are doing it less and less. The other thing that struck me was, and I think she's a great example of this, is that resilience comes partly from self-acceptance and self-understanding, and that her mantra that she shared, that I've got me, I loved it. It's very personal to her, but it just tells you something about, when your back's against the wall, is that I've got me. And it just encapsulates that understanding that there is resilience inside us all. Maybe it's innate, but again, it coming from self-awareness, from self-acceptance. And then the last thing I'll share that just struck me was the way that she talked about individual expression beating and be more powerful than conformity. And that activity she shared about the photographic workshop, I just think it's such a simple but profound way of teaching teenagers that, being authentic and unique is more valuable than trying to fit in or to fit into trends or to copy other people. And I think most adults, if they step back and think about it, they very often will see that in their own lives, whether it's keeping up with the Joneses or having to put on a face, which is exhausting. Unconsciously, we can kind of we end up very often conforming to the world, to people around us, and not forgetting and maybe losing ourselves in the process, which I think is one of the biggest challenges and tragedies, actually, is to lose yourself. So, as I said to you at the start of this podcast, don't do a lot of interviews. If you liked it, let me know. If you got something out of it, let me know. Or if something just struck you, maybe let me know as well. Other than that, ciao for now, and I'll see you at the next episode.